Today, thanks to a certain Dorito-coloured megalomaniac,
You are fake news.
many have become desensitized to presidential scandals. But before Trump, there was a time where a scandal caused uproar for the American people. During the 2004 election, a document was released that made many question the integrity of the then current president and Republican candidate George W. Bush. Documents from his former superior, Texas Air Commander Colonel Jerry B. Killian, were allegedly uncovered and published in September by Jackson Baker of the Memphis Flyer. And with this, the Killian document controversy had begun. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty details within the documents, it's important to remind yourself of the character of former President Bush, as his run as president was filled with controversies that led to a precarious relationship with his countrymen. Over the years, Bush has been portrayed in many ways in the media, from the current candy-giving innocent old man, to the clueless puppet of a war-thirsty vice president, the good old boy who could have a beer with you, and an array of ridiculous conspiracy theories. Is he a lizard? Is he really Ted Bundy? We'll never know. The constant shifts in the media portrayal of his character, as well as the external world events that surrounded his presidency, saw Bush's popularity rise and fall more than any other president, holding the record for both most and least popular president according to approval ratings. Bush's immediate response to the September 11th World Trade Center attacks gave him the full support of the American people, after his iconic speech struck a chord with a wounded population who was shook by this act of terrorism and eager for revenge.
I want you all to know that America today is on bended knee.
His popularity plummeted following this due to the handling of the Iraq invasion. Elected after a campaign centered on education, it could be argued he wasn't equipped to be a wartime president, and the decisions made during this time saw his popularity dip dramatically by the time the 2004 elections came around. This made him the perfect target for a scandal that would ensure his attempts of re-election would fail. The Killian documents allege that during the 1970s, Bush took unauthorized leave from his duties at the Alabama National Guard unit, following his transfer from his Texas post, a transfer he had personally requested so that he could help family friend Winton Blount on his Senate election. 3 members of the Alabama National Guard went on record to Baker, the author who broke the story, claiming that Bush did not make a single appearance during his year-long appointment at the base. Rumours surrounding Bush's time in Alabama had circulated the internet for years, but Baker was the first to put pen to paper and put the story into the mainstream media. The story was pushed even more when CBS TV show 60 Minutes covered the story on September 8, 2004. In the summer of 2004, CBS producer Mary Mapes received 2 documents from former National Air Guard Lieutenant Colonel Bill Burkett that were allegedly written and kept secret by Colonel Killian. The documents contained orders for Bush to take his annual physical, a conversation about the Alabama transfer request, and a memo from Killian requesting Bush's suspension from flight status due to Bush's refusal to take said physical. In the final memo, the document showed Killian's complaints over senior pressure to sugarcoat Bush's evaluation, with Killian stating it was making it difficult for him to perform his duties. This was done supposedly to prevent any harm a negative evaluation could do to Bush's political aspirations. Mapes employed multiple forensic experts to assess the authenticity of the documents. They expressed doubts of the documents' legitimacy. At this time, Bush and his election opposition John Kelly were neck and neck in the polls, with Bush narrowly leading the popularity polls at 48 to 47. Democrats did not want a repeat of the 2000 election, in which their candidate, Al Gore, was narrowly beaten, and so, despite the experts' warning, Mapes went ahead with the production of the September 8th 60 Minutes show. The show was presented by media mainstay Dan Rather, a man who, over a 30-year career, had become synonymous with late-night news coverage, which added false legitimacy to the story. On the show, Rather claimed that the documents had been confirmed as authentic by experts hired by CBS, a fact we now know as a lie. This haphazard attempt of character assassination is an example of one of the oldest mass communication theories, the hypodermic needle or the magic bullet theory. Created by Harold Laswell, the theory comes from a fear of the mass media and their ability to shape public opinion. This theory serves as a visualization. An idea is taken by a media corporation and then injected into the minds of the general public, who then take the idea on into their own personal opinion. In this case, the idea was that Bush was incapable of leadership and failed to perform his duties. CBS attempted to force this into a general public consensus in hope of swaying the election to allow a Democrat to become president. In the hours following the airing of 60 Minutes, Republican supporters took to the internet looking for ways to discredit the documents. Initial doubts focused on typographic anachronisms, including curved apostrophes, superscripted abbreviations such as TH, that appeared throughout the memos, and the use of proportionally spaced fonts, all of which were uncommon for typewriters at the time. Killian himself was dead, meaning that he couldn't confirm or deny the documents. However, his son expressed doubts in an interview with Fox News, as his father was not the type to keep secret documents. In light of these criticisms, which by now had made their way into the mainstream media, CBS hired Dick Thornburgh, former Pennsylvania governor and Attorney General under George H.W. Bush, and Louis Bacardi, former CEO and president of the Associated Press, to assess the handling of the situation and highlight where mistakes were made. The final report was released in 2005 and found CBS at fault for the way they approached the story, stating that they had failed to properly authenticate the documents, that they had exaggerated claims of experts, and failed to find interviewees who may have offered an opposing view. The report also criticised Mapes for colluding with Kerry's campaign advisor, further suggesting bias in the coverage of the story. In the fallout of this scandal, Mary Mapes was fired, and several other top producers at CBS were asked to resign. Dan Rather stepped down as CBS Evening News anchor a year earlier than he had intended to retire, and Bush ultimately went on to win the election. The authenticity of the documents is still unclear to this day, and the original writer, if they are fake, is unknown. The whole fiasco could be used as an example of the boomerang theory. This theory was created by Hovland, Janis and Kelly and examines an attempt to persuade the public. Due to a multitude of factors, in this case a weak source, the argument fails to convince people and instead convinces them of the opposite of the intended conclusion. So, like a boomerang, the argument comes flying back at their face. The story failed to impact Bush's approval ratings, and as he went on to be re-elected, the purpose of this story was ultimately unsuccessful. As we mentioned at the start of the video, Bush is no stranger to conspiracy theories. Some have placed doubts on the initial purpose of the story and why it was handed over to CBS in the first place. Due to the previously mentioned handling of the Iraq War, the American people were focused on the actions that had transpired during Bush's first term. This has led some to believe that the documents were given to CBS to shift the focus onto the character of the president instead of his actions, a much stronger argument for Bush, who has always had a talent for coming across as earnest. If this is in fact true, the controversy would be an example of McCombs and Shaw's agenda-setting theory, which states that the media cannot tell the people what to think, but can tell them what to think about. In this case, the character of Bush, and if he is a good person to lead the country, rather than his actions, which may show that he wasn't really fit for presidency. After Bush's victory in the 2004 elections, and the subsequent firings made at CBS in response to the backlash this story produced, many have just simply forgotten about the Killian documents, meaning that, without further investigation, many of the questions that we have regarding the controversy will forever be shrouded in mystery.